Hey guys, welcome back to Honey the Rock. I almost did it. I said episode, and I don't know what episode number this is.
That's okay.
But it's like my habit of saying, oh, I'm Sophie. This is my friend Audrey.
Hi.
But we were joking. I always say, like, I have the same thing I say every time. It's not on purpose. It's, hey guys, welcome back to Honey the Rock episode blank. But I keep forgetting to look at what episode number it is. And we just talked about, I was like, I'm going to say another episode. But I didn't say that. I said episode. That's okay. We don't know episode. But my guess is 92 or 91 or 93. One of those three numbers.
One of the lucky
numbers.
You
like they're really lucky numbers. So we actually go way back. Way back to when we were 4 years old. We met at church. We were kind of like best friends from the beginning.
Yeah.
A lot of my childhood memories are with Audrey, actually.
Yeah.
I think
like almost all of them, I feel like.
Yeah, actually. A lot of them. And I always be like, this is my church friend Audrey. And we played a lot of games. We were basically mothers. We just pushed baby dolls around in strollers. If we went to the other one's house, we brought all of our baby supplies.
I know. I was thinking about that the other day. I was like, we're literally living out like our dream.
Right. Literally.
Like all we wanted was to drive an actual car. Like we thought we were so cool, like sitting in your mom's car.
Yes.
Pretending to steer it.
And we would like put chairs and line chairs up.
And your bus?
In the bus, yes. And we would pretend like we were driving this old car in our driveway.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of how we met. And since then it's been, sweet friendship. We didn't talk to each other like a year.
When people say stories and they're like, and the rest is history.
The rest is history.
That's what it sounded like.
It literally is. The rest is history. But it really has been like a solid friendship. We had one year, like a year ago, where we were both in such weird life seasons, which we'll get into deeper. And honestly, it was just a little immaturity on probably both of our parts.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just some hurt happening in both of our lives that probably kind of got taken out on each other in ways. And so neither one of us were great friends for each other. And then we were like, okay, enough of that crap. You're my friend, and we've always been friends.
Right.
Let's talk through it like grown adults. And we did. And there was never like actually drama. Right. It was just kind of like, we just didn't talk every day like we were talking. And then eventually we're talking again, and now her phone is bonking.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. And now it's been honestly so sweet again. So it's like such good memories. And then growth on both of our parts that then led us to have a more mature relationship. Yeah. It's not just, oh, that's my childhood friend. It's like, oh, she's also my now friend.
Right.
So I think
but I feel like our relationship now has been like more
healthier.
Yeah, I don't know what the word is, but just like a deeper relationship.
Yes, it's more fruitful.
Yeah.
For sure. Like we almost like the Lord, I repeat myself a lot. Like I'll say the same word twice.
That's okay.
I said it's almost. But why would I do that? I should have said it's almost.
That's really fun.
Anyway, sorry. It really was. It was almost like God did that in a way so then we could rekindle and then be fruitful. Right. And then it really was our choice to be friends. It wasn't, this is my childhood friend that we're just always together.
Right.
It was like, we're choosing to be friends, and this is going to be a friendship that honors the Lord and glorifies Him. And it has. There's been so much for like every time we talk, I'm like, we should have been recording because this is stuff I needed to hear, and I know other people also need to hear. And so
I think also like when you go to church together or something, it's almost like it's an excuse to be friends. And when we're like not on the same paths anymore when it comes to stuff like that, it's like it makes it more sweet because it's genuinely just us wanting to be together and not like, oh, see you every Sunday and Wednesday, every youth trip, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like it's genuinely
each other.
Right.
And then even like we never went to the same school. It was never like, and so now it's like we have to be intentional in seeing each other, which
and like updating each other on our life, which makes it sweeter.
It's been so good. So we have two stories we want to share. One story. It's just like a core memory. These are core memories of my brain. We were at Audrey's house. We had very distinct things that we did at each of our houses.
Yeah, and they were very different.
They were. We painted, at your house, we always painted our nails on the back porch and went on your trail.
Yeah.
And then I have a lot of memories in your room, like playing with dolls in your room, like just like little things in your room.
Yeah.
And then at my house, it was always like we were doing something outside.
Yeah.
My mom was driving us somewhere. We were like going to the store. We would go shopping. We did a lot of baking here.
We did do a lot of baking, cooking.
Yeah.
We got our nails done a lot with your mom.
We did. Yeah, my mom would paint our mom. We're sisters, actually. Surprise. Yeah, my mom.
A claim res, my mom.
We did a lot of things. Like we went above and beyond.
Yeah.
Like if we were painting our nails, we set it up like a nail salon.
Oh yeah.
But
everything was a whole
house.
thing.
It was a production, honestly.
All of them.
Which is fun. It's like romanticizing your life in a healthy way.
Yeah.
But we would ride a bike trail at Audrey's neighborhood or walk because we thought we were grown adults. And I was like, I just ran over something. And I look back, how old were we? 8 probably?
Wasn't I in front of you?
No, I drove over
Oh,
first.
no, right. You were in front of me. You were.
And I drove over the snake. And I was like,
you were like, stop.
Yeah. And I realized, I knew I ran over a bump. And we looked back, and it is the longest snake I've ever seen.
When you had said that, I hadn't passed it yet. So
right.
I didn't realize what was happening.
Yes.
And you're like yelling, and I'm like, what are you talking about?
Right.
I literally go over like a speed bump. Like it was like,
yeah.
And I look back, and it's like a coiled up snake the size of Mount Everest.
And it was like blocking the trail, so there's no way. And so I was on one side of the snake, and she was on the other side of the snake. And I was like, I'm not going over the snake again.
Yeah.
Like, I just went over it one time. I guess you're going to have to go over it. Okay. You're pedaling, and you ran over the snake. And then we, like, pedaled as fast as we could. And then we sat down on, like, some fence.
Yeah. Because
our hearts were beating so fast because of the snake incident.
I'm pretty sure that's the biggest snake I've ever seen on that trail.
I've never seen
it. Because you just see, like, just looks like this or something.
It was huge.
It was massive.
So that's a core memory. And it was so funny. We thought it was hilarious after we calmed down.
Yeah.
Like, after our heart rates went down.
I remember you being like, it could have, like, eaten my foot on my pedals.
I thought it was going to, like, when I ran over it, it was going to, like, come up and chomp my ankle.
Yeah,
that could have been bad.
Yeah, they could have.
And then your core memory is
us sitting on your neighborhood sign.
Yep.
Eating Cheez-Its.
We would eat Cheez-Its.
And white cheddar Cheez-Its, actually.
White cheddar Cheez-Its. And we would sing. Like, welcome.
Yeah, and we'd wave at all the neighbors that would come in.
Because her mom sold oils. And so they would come to our house, and my mom would, like, have the party.
Yeah.
And it was, like, oil selling party. And we would just hang out.
Take our Cheez-Its.
And we would take our Cheez-Its.
To the neighborhood sign.
Sit on there. And we went to Great Lodge. We went to the beach. We went to the lake. We have a lot of good memories. But we're going to actually get into the parts of the podcast, or we could keep telling memories, honestly. Point them back to how we saw Jesus.
Literally.
But it really has been sweet. And God's perfect timing and looking back at how he timed things. And honestly, like the year that we didn't talk, but then now the perfect timing of when he softened our hearts to just have this like love for each other, the perfect timing of when stuff hit the fan again, which is going to be a consistent thing.
Yeah.
And so I just think it's been so good, and it's just sweet to see these Christ-centered friendships of just like when we get together, we're not gossiping about other people. We're not, and we're like, before we started this podcast, I was like, I was struggling with this. I was like, I go, do I have a love of money? Do I have this thing of money? And what do I do about that? And you were saying, well, I'm trying to work on this outpour of love of this. And it's just like our friendship is centered around Jesus.
Mm-hmm. And
especially now that we're older, it's like, I crave that more and more. And so then when I have that in friendship, I crave that friendship more.
Yeah.
So I encourage you to dive deep with Jesus, with your friends, because it's going to bring you guys close together and then more respect and understanding for each other, honestly.
Yeah.
It's like, I get it. It's hard. So there's that. But we also talked about, right before, she's been recording this whole time, but the word testimony kind of feels like sometimes hard to explain when you grew up in a Christian home, that you were always just kind of around Jesus. And so,
or it's almost like an emphasis, like your testimony has to be up to this standard, almost.
Yes.
And it's like unspoken, and it's like no one says that, but it's almost like
you feel that.
If it's not like some wow factor, then you're like, oh, well, that's not good enough. But like, no, it is.
It is, yes. And so it's like maybe your testimony doesn't have a long before Jesus part, but that doesn't make it less important or less powerful. Like God can use anything. And then also, like, who are we to say, like, oh, God can't use my story because I grew up in a Christian home.
Right.
And so just more, I'll phrase the question of like, what's been your life now that you know Jesus, even when things are hard? So things are hard, but you know Jesus. So what's life like? What are the things that you're going through that like are really hard, but it's pulling you back to Jesus because he's the rock.
Right.
So it's like, yes, it is your testimony, and nobody's testimonies look the same. Yeah, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And it's like, also look how sweet it is to see this generational thing of like, oh, your dad loved Jesus, and this person loved Jesus, and this person loved Jesus, and it's like, oh, that's also really cool.
Yeah.
To look at. Yeah. So, what's your story with Jesus?
What's your story?
Where do you want to begin, other than on the Cheez-It sign?
Oh yeah,
eating our Cheez-It.
So I mean, I guess like Sophie said, my testimony is kind of I mean, it's not crazy, like she was saying. It's kind of like I would say my testimony kind of started 4 years ago. And it was kind of like my story. I mean, I grew up always in a church home, and like I've always gone to church. My parents have always been very God fearing, God believing people. And so it was just kind of like one day the Lord spoke to me in a sermon, and I just gave my life to the Lord one night. I was out on my back porch with my mom. And so it was kind of just like I knew the Lord, I knew all of that. And I just kind of, it almost felt like I was scared if I didn't in that moment, then I was immediately going to go to hell. Yes. And so it was more of fear.
Right, I agree.
Was that. And so it took me a long time after that. I mean, it wasn't like I was super young, but it still took me a long time after that to realize my actual need for the Lord.
Yeah.
And so I think that started almost 5 years ago when my dad was diagnosed with cancer. And then I lost my grandma in the midst of all of that.
Right.
And that's kind of when I would say, like, when I think of my testimony, I think of like the Lord redeeming my life. And that's truly when that started.
Right.
It was 5 years ago, almost.
I know. And then it's honestly like being in your life at that point, like, you know, we're our best friends in this thing, and to know somebody so well in the way of being a kid. And honestly, I think that a lot of my like beginning salvation was out of fear too.
Yeah.
Of like, this is what I'm supposed to do.
Right.
So it's what I'm gonna do.
Right.
And then it was when hard things happened is when I realized like, oh, I need Jesus.
Yeah.
But then also to be the friend of watching your friend be in pain. Like I remember the day you told me your dad had cancer. And then being in that journey and you text me like, oh, we're trying to figure this out. Or, oh, you know, is he going to do this treatment or this treatment? Or are we going to go here for surgery or here for surgery? And just like things like that, and just to be friends. And it sucks, honestly, to have to watch somebody go through that. And then it's also like, oh, well, I shouldn't be upset because it's not me. But then also it's like, I'm heartbroken that you're walking through this story.
Right.
And to learn how to be gracious. And then it's like, oh, now that I'm older, not the most mature, but more mature than I was in what, 8th grade or and then it's like, oh, well, how can I now be gracious? And so like, what would you say you like needed from people in that time? Like maybe for somebody listening who has a friend walking through a season, like when yours started 5 years ago, what was the thing that was actually helpful to you?
I think it's consistency.
Yeah.
Because I think it's almost like, especially when my dad died, it was like immediate, everyone's there.
Right.
And then it dies down, and then it's like people have forgotten almost.
Right.
They haven't forgotten,
Right.
but they don't bring it up.
Right.
And it's like a middle ground of not being pitied and not being like, this is all that I am, is my identity of losing my dad.
Right.
I am still human, but at the same time, like, he was such a huge part of my life.
Yeah.
So I think like just consistency and like checking in and encouraging.
Yeah.
And just, it may not even be like, how can I pray for you? Like, just like, you're so strong. You are doing so well. Like, I'm so proud of you.
Right.
Like, it just can be something so little, but just the consistency is like, it starts.
Right.
You start to believe it.
Yeah,
you know?
That's so true. And honestly, like when you used to say, like when we would, I remember you saying this in middle school, but like when we looked back at our friendship, it was like, it was the most consistent one.
Yeah.
It was just always us. And it was always that like, we were just always, it literally was just always us. And so I think that is sweet. And I also like encourage that on both sides of like, to find that consistent person is so important, and to show up consistently. And I think we can dive back into your story a little more in a second, but that part of showing up for people once the bad thing happened. And I think that's what was honestly so sweet, because when I, like, my eyes were opened back, I was like, no, like, I miss Audrey. Like, we've been so consistent for so long. And then all of a sudden we didn't talk for 6 months. And so then that was really hard because it was this consistent thing.
Yeah.
But then we started talking before your dad passed, which then was like, I was praising Jesus for that, because then I was like, oh, I don't want it to seem like I came back just because her dad died.
Right.
Because it's like, no, I'm coming back because I love her.
Right.
And I'm ready to walk this road. I kept trying to say that. I was like, I don't know what to say, but I'm ready to walk it with you.
Yeah.
Like, whatever this road leads us to, because I know the next hard thing I go through, you're going to walk it with me too. And it's like, that's what friendship looks like. And that's what being consistent looks like. And Jesus is so consistent. And like, he is the perfect picture of consistent. And it's like, whenever someone's like, oh, I don't feel the presence of God, it's like, oh, well, you're the one running away. God's not running away. Like, God is actually staying right here.
Yeah.
and he's drawing you close and we're running. And so it's like he's consistent. So what does
Yeah.
it look like for us to be consistent in life? But kind of take us through those like 5 years of after your dad's diagnosis until a couple months ago when he passed away to go be with Jesus. What did that look like? What did, obviously there's a lot of pain in that and suffering of different types. So you can share a little bit of whatever you're comfortable about that, and then kind of just how you've been able to see Jesus still. You know, it's like hard thing, hard thing, hard thing, hard thing.
Right.
But Jesus is still good.
Yeah. Yeah, so he was diagnosed with cancer on Christmas Day of 2019, I think. And so that was obviously a lot to begin with and just a great hard pill to swallow.
Right.
And so that was, I mean, there's like 1,000 details I could talk about it for 10 years. But
right.
So there was a lot of like in and out of the hospital, a lot of like, oh my gosh, is he about to die? No, he's okay. It was a lot of roller coaster. It was a lot of, okay, we're fine. No, you're about to die. Right. Okay, you're gonna get better. Nope, you're about to die. Like it was just constant.
It's not consistent.
It was very inconsistent. And so he had a major surgery. I don't remember what year. Maybe it was 2020.
Yeah,
it was when COVID started, and my whole family had to move down to Florida for his surgery because he went to a specialist or something for the surgery. And it was during COVID, so none of my family was able to be in the hospital with him, and it was a very risky surgery. But he knew this was what needed to happen, and so we just tried to FaceTime him when we could, and we were just like, we were alone because of COVID, so no family could come and visit us. We couldn't visit him. It was very isolating. So that was really hard, and that's kind of when I started to realize like how desperate I was for the Lord. Right. When you're literally in a random state, you don't know where you're at. Right. Your dad is in the hospital, like could be dead at any moment. Right. No one can come help. Right. And so you're like in a new house, in a new place, new everything. Your dad's not there. You don't have contact with him. Right. Like you don't know what's gonna happen. Right. And so you're like, I genuinely have nothing else to lean on but the Lord. Right. And so he started healing really well from that. We found out that the surgery didn't work as we hoped. And so that was, again, another roller coaster. Like, oh, this was so good. He's doing amazing. Oh, it didn't work. Right. And so we finally moved back home, and we just started new treatments. We tried everything. My dad was very, I don't know what the word is, but just like, very adamant about doing a natural route. So he was very prayerful about all of that. And I think that's honestly the reason that he lived so much longer, besides the Lord's grace, was just the way that he was letting the Lord like heal him. Right. And so he started treatments. He did really well. And then about maybe a year ago, things kind of started to just keep getting worse, keep getting worse. He was in so much pain. That's kind of when I would say things really started to get bad. And it was like, okay, like it's coming soon. Right. And it was like you didn't want to believe that because my dad was so hopeful. He never once was like, I'm gonna die. Like he knew the Lord was not finished with his story. And people who have his cancer don't live more than like 2 months, I think. Right. And so just the time that we had with him was like a complete miracle. Right. And so he was just so hopeful, and like he is the most faithful person I've ever met in my whole life. Yeah. And so it kept us going because it was never like we weren't wallowing in it because of him. Right. And so it just started slowing down. Things were getting really hard, and then just hard to watch too. Right. Just like from the kids' perspective, it was really hard to watch, just suffering, and you can't do anything to help. Right. And he was just in so much pain. And so then we had hospice, and hospice that's kind of when we started to just do what's called palliative care. Yeah. So you just stop our treatment and you kind of just stay comfortable until your time comes. Yeah. And so that was really good because they were very caring for us as a family and also him, and that was a huge blessing. They would come give him massages and pray over us, and just like it was very sweet, and it felt like we weren't alone in that. Yeah. And then it just kind of kept going, and he was like fine most of the time. Like he could still talk, he could still do stuff. And then it was a Sunday, things just got terrible. And it was absolutely terrible. He started having seizures and he had a stroke. It was like just a lot of things. And it happened very fast. Yeah. And then the next day, he was with the Lord. Right. And so it was beautiful to see his faithfulness of like, he was not suffering the way that he was those last 24 hours for those 4 years. Right. It was like beautiful. Yeah. And I think just the way that he so peacefully, like, the entire time leading up, he knew it was coming. He knew like this was what was going to happen, and it was like he could just rest because of the way that he lived his life.
Right.
And I think that's one thing that's been so inspiring to me is like the way that he lived his day-to-day life was so fruitful that at the end of his life, he wasn't like, oh my gosh, I should have done this, I should have done this, I should have done this. He just rested.
Right.
Because he had given his life to the Lord.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's so important to remember is it's not like, oh, this one big moment, like what I've been going through. That's when you give your life to the Lord and the rest is just normal.
Right.
Like every single day, that's when you choose the Lord so that when that time comes, you can fully rest.
Right. That's so good. That is actually so good. I'm just going to cry. Like, I was going to ask you something else and I don't remember because now I'm just thinking like, and I can just picture it and to know him is also, I think what's interesting is sometimes when people die, you almost make them seem better than they were. You know, like it's like, oh, they were such a saint. They were so nice. It's like, no, they were, you know, yelling at people out their window, flicking everybody off. Like they weren't that good.
Right.
But your dad was great. Yep. You know, like he was such an example of who Jesus was. And it was known as I walked into your house as a 5-year-old. And when I walked into your house the day after he died. He died like 24 hours ago. And I walked into your house and I was like, I don't know what I'm about to walk into. I'm like, Lord, I'm going to need the strength. I don't know. I'm like, I just need to be here for Audrey. And I walked and it was the most peaceful environment I've ever felt. And I'm like, there's no way somebody died in here yesterday. And that's a testament of who he was, but also of how Jesus is into your family. And even when it's been hard, and I'm not saying it's been easy at any point. And there's obviously been times of like, why God? Where are you, God? Wake up, God. And the hard questioning, the lamenting and all of these hard things. Yeah. But also just to walk in there and just be welcomed with this peace was like, whoa, this is incredible. And so I think that is just really sweet. But then also just what you just said, like to live your life every day choosing Jesus on the good days and the bad days. Mm-hmm. So when it is our time, you're not going to be worried. You're not going to be living in regret. It's like, oh, now. And it also shows, I think, a lot of people who are listening are in high school and college. And so I think a lot of it's like, oh, well, the next season. This is my time to just live it up and do whatever I want and date whoever I want, go to whatever party I want and make any decision. And I will follow Jesus eventually. But let me get through this stage right now. And I think that's kind of like why it's important to wake up right now. Yeah. Like, look at what you have right now. Your dad wasn't perfect, but he started to choose Jesus every day. And I think that's just encouraging for us. It's like, choose Jesus now and every day. And then the fruit is going to come from your life because of Jesus being the one who's creating that fruit. Right. And I think that's just really sweet. And it's just cool to see the story of like who your dad was and just the interactions he's had with Jesus, honestly. Yeah. Why his time here and to be like, now he's with Jesus. How fun. Like, they got along so well down here. Yeah. I can't imagine what they're like up in heaven. And so I think that's been sweet. And then also just to like say how you're like, I didn't have regret. Yeah. Because there's that song, it's like, live like you were dying. Yeah. You know, it's like, they were singing that song in probably more way, like, live like you're dying, live it up. You know, make all the things, do everything, be loud, be this. But when honestly, like, if you dive into that, it's like, if we're living like we're dying, then we're going to love harder. We're going to forgive faster. We're going to just hold on to things. And since you knew the time was coming, it was like, these are my last moments with my dad. No matter how long that was, you were able to live intentionally with him. Yeah. And I think for the listener, even if you're not walking through that season, maybe your dad doesn't have cancer. Maybe life is great at this point. Or maybe it's something different that's also another hard. If we're loving well and being intentional and loving well and forgiving quick, then we're going to just not have that regret. And we're going to, in return, look what we're like Jesus. I mean, what we were saying earlier, she was like, I've been praying for, to be living out the fruits of the Spirit. And I was like, no way, I've been praying that too. I've been, praying like, Lord, help the overflow of my heart be the fruits of the Spirit. And so I can look more like you and love better and be kinder. And it's also really cool that you've been praying that as well. And that's why it's important to talk to your friends and like, what's the Lord teaching you? What is this? And that's a good question just to ask. But then to see that in your life, even after the hardest thing happens. like the worst thing happened. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, what's the worst thing? Oh, they died. He did that. Like, it is the bad thing happened.
Yeah.
But now to live with such peace,
Mm-hmm.
even when it's hard.
Yeah.
It's really encouraging.
Yeah. I think one thing that has been like the Lord has just been so gracious with is I've like prayed 1,000 times. Like, Lord, help me to see this the way that you do. Like, help me to have eyes to see the story the way that you do with spiritual eyes.
Yeah.
And like, He has completely answered that prayer because people will ask me, they're like, how do you have so much faith? Like, how are you going through this and like still smiling?
Right.
And I'm like, because this is so cool. Like, this is so cool that I get to suffer for the one who died for me. Like, that I get to use my dad dying to further his kingdom. Like, this is so cool that the Lord trusted me with this.
Yeah.
To know that, like, I can use this for his glory and I'm not going to run away from him.
Right.
Like, it's so cool. And everything, I think everything's just like your perspective.
It is.
Like, yes, this sucks. Yes, now I don't have a dad for the rest of my life. No one's going to walk me down the aisle.
Right.
There's no going to be father-daughter dance.
Right.
But like, okay, am I going to sit and wallow in that? Or am I going to think about the ways that my dad led me to the Lord and the ways that I can use his story to change the world?
Right.
And so I think it's all just like your perspective. And everyone's like, it's all in your mind. But like, it really is.
Yeah.
Like, the way that you view the hard
right.
is like going to change. And I think hard will always come. Like, that's just a part of life. And so I think, like you were saying, it's so important to be intentional about like being in your word now, even if you're not. Because when you get to that season, like, you're going to be able to go through it with joy because you know who the Lord is. You know who your foundation is set on. So you know, like, what you're fighting for. Right. And you're not going to know if you don't start when you're desperate.
Right. And that's so good. And this is all kind of tied together. Like, I try to, how my brain works is like summary sentences. Like, I have to have a sentence of like, but I think what's really sweet is like this idea of consistency. This idea that Jesus is consistent for us. And we should keep showing up consistently in the lives of the people we love and for Jesus because we love him. And when we're consistent in that, we're going to live with more fruitful lives. Whether we're going to die tomorrow, we're going to die in 25 years or 45 years. It's like if we're living consistently now, the fruit that's going to come from that is going to be so amazing. And then choose your heart almost. Yeah. Like, you could look at everything both ways. It is hard that you watched your dad die. It's also hard that he died. So you're going to have to choose a hard. Either he was going to keep suffering or you're going to have to die. Like, or choose your heart of like, school is really hard, but also not going to school is also being hard because you're not going to have education to get a job that you need. Right. Choose your heart. And so it's like, what heart are you going to choose? And then how are you going to use that as perspective? And it's just, I'm so proud of how you have done that. Like, you could turn and be like, screw all of that. Right. And now, and some days it probably feels like that. Yeah. But you're waking up every day choosing not to do that. And when you don't want to, you still choose it. That then you're showing up consistently to the word of God that he's given us as a blessing. And then choosing that perspective of like, this is hard. Yeah. And what can I do with this hard? Because there's no going to change anything. Right. So it's like, okay, am I going to be positive or negative? You can sit in the negative all you want. And you also have the right to be. Like, honestly, it's like, no one's going to judge you for being negative about what just happened in your life. Right. But it's just sweet to see that you're choosing that and just the faithfulness of the Lord to allow you to do that and allow you to see that and answer your prayers in that way of like, this is hard. And I'm going to choose you. Yeah. And we're going to, something good is going to come from this. That verse keeps coming up, Romans 8:28. Like, I think it's 8, I could have made that up. But the things are going to be good for those who love him. And when we look at it from the eternal mindset, it's good because God is good. And when it's good for the kingdom, it's good for his people. And so I think it's just been so encouraging to watch you walk this journey. And I'm honored to be your friend to try to walk it with you. And just to see it and to see the fruitfulness of your dad, but then just the fruitfulness of you the day after you're like, I don't have any regrets. I'm thankful I don't have any regrets because you lived in full intentionality, maybe made that up. Intentionally, yeah, with your dad. And in return, that's making me be intentional with even my dad. Yeah. Or with everything. It's like, okay, how can I love well? How can I forgive fast? Because we're not promised tomorrow. And it's not worth it. Yeah. It's not worth it for me to hold a grudge because I rather love well. Yeah. And how I'm going to do that is I'm going to need Jesus to help me. Yeah. And I'm going to need to stay in his word. And I'm going to need to pray that I have the fruits of the Spirit overflowing in my life. And then I'm going to need to connect with friends like you to have a Christ-centered relationship. And when we talk, we're talking about Jesus. even when we're talking about life, it's connecting back to Jesus. It's like, oh, I went to the beach. It was so sweet. Oh, why was it sweet? Because Jesus was there. Like things like that. It's like we put it all back to Jesus, and that's how I want to live. I don't want to live, oh, I'm going to do that after college, or when I get married, or when I have my own house, or when I can do this, or when I can do this. We're going to do that forever. It's like, no, start now.
Yeah.
Love Jesus now, and love those around you now.
Yeah.
It's not worth it to wait.
Yeah.
And I don't want to have regret. I don't want something to happen. And I think just knowing your story and you being open about the journey of being willing to be like, today is hard, and today is good. And to like you being willing to be open with me as your friend, then helps me understand that. So then it's like, but then you also, I can be open with you. It's just like, decided. Yeah. And I don't know. It's just, it's been really cool. And then to see both sides of the journey, to know you before it, during it, and after it, and to see your heart in it. It's like, oh, that's clearly Jesus.
Yeah.
There's no way you can pick up and keep going.
Right.
And not just become hard-hearted and angry without the love of Jesus.
Yeah.
And so encouraging.
Yeah. I think regret is like comes from a prideful heart of like I could have run away when he was in such a terrible condition. I should have like it's traumatizing to look at. Right. So I could have run if it could to help myself. Right. But that's a place of pride of being like, I don't want to see that. Like, no, those are the moments when I ran to my dad.
Right.
And I have always played basketball. Like, you know that. Right. I've played basketball my whole life. And I quit basketball my senior year to be with my dad. Right. And, like, I do not regret that for a second. No. Like, I would practice 4 hours a day. Like, it was all-consuming my life. Right. And I quit for my dad. And I never want to regret that. Right. Yes, it's been harder grieving because I was closer to him. Right. But I grieve with joy because I don't regret. I don't regret running away to basketball as a distraction from what I was going through. Right. And it's not wrong to have a distraction, but it's also wrong to run from the problem.
Well, you also have to choose a priority.
Right.
And your priority was to know your dad.
Right. And so I think that is truly what's helped. Obviously, besides the Lord. Like, I would not be here breathing if it wasn't just the Lord's grace. Right. Because it's not me waking up. Like, I can't do that. No. I couldn't. But I think it's just like, the Lord's grace of just like, I don't have regret because the Lord gave me a humbleness from his strength, not my own, because I'm not humble alone. Right. And grace and mercy and strength to sit there and look at that and to continue to pursue a relationship with him, knowing what I was setting myself up for. Right. But like, it makes it so much easier to grieve knowing I lived well with him. Like every single moment he needed something, I would have bent over backwards for him, and I did. And so I can live knowing I served him well, and I had such a great relationship with him. Right. And I've sat there and listened to his wisdom, and like my life has changed because of that. Right. And that would have been so easy for me to become prideful and hard in my heart and be like, I don't want to see that. I don't want that trauma. Right. And just run away. Right. And then you live with regret. Yes. Right. And so but it goes back to loving well. Yeah. Love Jesus well. Just praying for selflessness. Right. Because that doesn't come from us. No. It's not us. And then it still comes up, which is kind of what's funny. Like, I prayed for this selflessness and for humility and not to be prideful and all these things. And I'll go weeks. And then one day I'm like, how did that sneak up? It's sneaky. Yeah. And the only way to fight against it is with Jesus and to be humbled by him at the foot of the cross. Like, to know it's like, whoa, Jesus suffered and died for me. Yeah. And now I get to walk this journey. Yeah. And to just change that perspective. What did we call it? We were at Bridge City. We were talking about it. Like, where it's like, changing is good. Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. Rebranding. Rebranding. Yes. Yes. Where it's like you rebrand the situation. Yeah. Like, this is a hard situation. How can I rebrand it? You had a hard situation. You're like, this stinks. You made banana bread. Yeah. It's like, you rebranded the situation. Yeah. You know, there's so many situations like day to day. Like, this stinks. How can I rebrand this? Yeah. And rebranding it isn't being, what's the word, like, not like not being aware. Like, it's not being like, oh, everything's perfect in rainbows. Right. But it's like, okay, well, instead of having a bad attitude about this, how can I turn it? Right. Like, how can I make this positive? Right. Right. That's so good. Yeah. Well, this has been great. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Thanks for coming on. Of course. I hope this race story shines through you
and that the listener get just to see him. Like, even if they didn't know him, they get to see him through you, which I think is sweet. And then just how his story is just so kind. It's just so cool. I don't even have words. I feel like I'm kind of at a loss for words this whole podcast. But I wish I could just be like, here's my sentence. But there's just so much, and it's just like, whoa, how can I love others well?
Yeah.
But to love others well, I need to love Jesus well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm taking away.
Yeah.
So I'm going to love Jesus first.
Yeah.
And then from that, try my best to love others. And then when I fall short, because I will, lean back on who Jesus is.
Mm-hmm.
And ask for forgiveness.
Yes.
Well, thanks for watching. I'm going to the beach next week, if you're wondering. I'm really excited.
Love the beach.
I love the beach.
What's your new book? You're about to start?
Yeah, I'm going to read 4 books. Not
4 books?
Maybe 3.
Holy cow.
I gotta get reading.
Girl, where do you live
Since I graduated high school, I think I got dumber. I'm making up words. Can't say anything right. Can't spell anything right.
It's just an excuse to be more dumb. More dumb in school, more wise in the Bible and the Lord.
Right. Amen. Praise
Amen. Praise Him.
Good luck when I gotta call
yes,
it
and amen.
I'm not sure how that's gonna go. But I love you. Thanks for coming on.
Of course.
Also, if you guys are watching, I hope you like my new backdrop. I did that.
Oh, I love it. I'll be the first to say I love it.
I went to Hobby Lobby 3 times because I didn't think I was gonna need that much yarn.
Yeah, no, it is a lot of yarn. That's cute.
It is.
Sorry, I just whacked your flowers.
It's okay. They're like real.
But they're
I
dried?
put water in them, so I guess they dried.
Oh, well, it's cute. I guess.
Yep. So now I don't have to buy new ones. Anyways, thank you guys for watching.